Hi, I'm Mike Ryan. In Turquoise in America, Part 1, Great American Turquoise Rush, and Part 2, 1910 to 1990, we've looked at many of the well-known turquoise mines in America. But there's turquoise from all over the world, and some of that has played an important role in our story of turquoise in America. And we discussed that in our chapter called First Contact, where we hear the story of how Chinese turquoise was introduced into the American marketplace in the late 1980s. But prior to that, in about between 1915 to 1920, there was a lot of Persian turquoise that was imported for use in Native American jewelry. And Persian turquoise has always played an important role in turquoise in America. And the oldest turquoise came from Egypt. And that was discovered as long ago as 5,000 years ago. And it continues to be mined by Bedouin tribesmen in the South Sinai. So today, we're going to look at some turquoise from China, Persia, and Egypt. I hope you enjoy it. Here we have a large tray of Chinese turquoise, and we can learn a couple of things from looking at the turquoise on this tray. First of all, we can see about the origin in China of turquoise. That comes primarily from the Hubei province. And within Hubei, there are two main mining districts, one of which is around the old Yungai Temple mine, and the other just a little bit south of that in Zhoushan district. Another thing we learned from this is how many people tend to differentiate the quality of a turquoise from when it was extracted from the ground. They will say, well, this is old stock turquoise, as if somehow the 30 or 40 years difference between it being mined previously versus more recently makes a difference in the scope of the 100 million plus years that the turquoise was first formed. And the other thing is that how some people look on Chinese turquoise as somehow being inferior or not as good as U.S. turquoise. And of course, that's kind of silly because the turquoise doesn't care or know where it came out of the ground. In this tray, we are seeing what would be considered some of older stock turquoise, only in that it was sold in the U.S. back during the late 80s, early 90s. And this came from a collection by Rob Stapp, who's a well-known turquoise dealer. And I bought these small nuggets, a bunch of the small nuggets, and cut these. So here we're going to see here, anytime when you're seeing these small nuggets like this is all turquoise that I cut, and it will give you very much of an idea of what the turquoise looked like that was coming out of China during first contact, and why it had such an impact on the marketplace, because you had the introduction of Lander Blue in the mid-70s, and the price of that had shot up. And then during the 80s, getting very hard, high-grade turquoise from the U.S. mines became very difficult, very expensive. So when this material was introduced in the late 80s, it really sort of revolutionized the marketplace in that jewelers were able to get hold of this amazing turquoise that they hadn't had for, almost a decade. And they had been priced out of the market. Unfortunately, what happened after that good news was the bad news when the market became flooded, prices dropped dramatically, and it was a very difficult time for turquoise cutters and the turquoise marketplace. So once again, some examples of some very high-grade Hubei turquoise from the Yungai Temple mine. Here we see a small tray of some very high-grade Chinese turquoise. And what's really distinctive about this is the provenance of this turquoise. This turquoise at the top, this top row, and this cab here, this beautiful asymmetrical sort of teardrop look, were cut by Ron Alexander. And those of you who have read First Contact in Turquoise in America Part 2 will know the important role he played in introducing Chinese turquoise to the U.S. market in the late 80s. This bottom row is very interesting because we see two cabs look to have been cut probably from the same nugget, very similar formation, and both in the turquoise and in the matrix. And this cab, which is very different because it has sort of a greenish spider web formation to it, quite unique, very beautiful for Chinese turquoise. And this turquoise came from Yuki Wang. And Yuki's a young Chinese woman who works in Hubei. Xi'an is her base of operation. And she's part of a younger generation of turquoise dealers working closely with the miners in bringing very beautiful turquoise to market at what I consider to be very undervalued, underpriced prices into the marketplace. So we have, again, some beautiful looks for Chinese turquoise. Here we see a tray of Persian turquoise. Now, we call it Persian. I suppose to be accurate, it would be called Iranian turquoise. But because its history as Persia far predates the more recent creation of the Iranian political state, in the marketplace, Persian is still the accepted term. Most of the mining has been done in the northwest part of the country, in the Nishapur district, although there are other areas in the country of Iran where turquoise is mined. Although it's been fewer and fewer, I think largely because of the political situation in that area. Persian turquoise has for many years, until the last 100 years or so, was really the definitive turquoise in the marketplace. And this goes back to the time when Tavernier, Frenchman, first introduced turquoise into the court of Louis XIV in the 1700s. In fact, the name turquoise is the French term for pierre turquoise. Turquoise, which is the Turkish stone, and that was because the trade route came through Turkish merchants, many of them Armenian, who were bringing turquoise into the Western market. It was also important in the U.S. because for a period of time between the Great American Turquoise Rush in at about 1910 and the full development of the Nevada mines that were bringing turquoise to the growing Indian jewelry market, there was a shortage of turquoise available, so Indian traders were sourcing the turquoise from Persia. And Juan Lorenzo Hubbell was one of the foremost ones in doing that. And here on this side of the tray, here on the right, we can see turquoise that probably would have been more approximate of the turquoise that was being brought in at that time. Here we see in the center, we see some very distinctive high-grade Persian turquoise, some wonderful matrix that could easily be confused for American turquoise. From many different mines have this distinctive webbed pattern with this wonderful sort of rhyolite brown background. Very beautiful, desirable turquoise. Persian turquoise is still available in the marketplace and has an important role in the turquoise market. When we think of Persian turquoise, we think of the classic highest grade Persian turquoise, the robin's egg sky blue, as seen in this quite rare and really magnificent cabochon set in this quite nondescript bronze metal setting. But it gives you an idea, of course, the beautiful hardness of the material is seen by the polish, the high dome cut. If we look here into the bottom of the setting here, you can see the very traditional rounded cut. It's not flat. They haven't put this on a flat lap to make that a flat lap. And I think a lot of that had to do because of the way they were set, as we can see how this setting is shown. So again, this is what the Shah of Persia would have taken for his own collection, and probably would have set that in a helmet of one of his soldiers, because in Farsi, the word for victory, peruse, is very close to the same root, and the same root for Foruja, which is turquoise in Farsi. So I wanted to share a really, really beautiful and rare piece of the highest grade of Persian turquoise. So in our last tray of our study of Chinese, Persian, and Egyptian turquoise, we get to Egyptian. And Egypt was really the location where the first turquoise that we know of was mined. And we know of this because the turquoise was found in the crypts of the ancient pharaohs, where this stone would be included in their sarcophagus. And we saw that in this country in the 1970s when the exhibit from the tomb of King Tutankhamun, King Tut, toured the United States. It was quite an event for those of you who remember that. Here we see some very beautiful high-grade turquoise that would match the finest you would find from any mine in the United States. This turquoise is mined, as it has been for probably thousands of years, by Bedouin tribesmen who are very protective of their mining rights. And the Egyptian government really doesn't care, because they don't care about turquoise, but they do care about the other mineral interest in the southern Sinai. So they're happy. As long as the Bedouin are happy mining turquoise, the Egyptian government is happy. But you probably don't want to just drop in down in the South Sinai looking for turquoise. You would need to have introductions. The Bedouin are fierce. I did speak with some Egyptian dealers because I was concerned about the reports of terrorist activity, ISIS activity in the Sinai. And he said, yes, they are there, but they're closer to Israel. They're up in the north. And I thought, well, that makes sense. And he said, plus, they don't want to mess with the Bedouin. Nobody wants to mess with the Bedouin. So here we have beautiful Egyptian turquoise. Unfortunately, what has happened to a lot of Egyptian turquoise is, for some reason, there was an idea that if the turquoise were treated, it's going to be better, have more commercial application. And while this is true of the softer stone, harder stone like this has no need to be treated. So finding natural Egyptian turquoise can be somewhat of a challenge. So you do have to be aware of that in the marketplace. But when you find stones like this, you are really in for a treat, because it is really quite exceptional.